Hello, I'm Mike Parrish, Agriculture Extension Agent in Dinwiddie County, and I'm for the soil because it's the foundation to everything in agriculture.
Here we go with another episode of For the Soil, a conversation. Hello, everybody. I'm Jeff Hishy. I'm your host, along with my co-host, Dr. Eric Benfelt, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Community Viability, and Mary Sketch Bryant with the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. We'll get to our special guest in just a moment, but a quick reminder, we have some new posts on our blog at the website, forthesoil.org. Just go to the menu bar at the top of the page. Over on the right-hand side, just click on the word blog, and there you will find at least 3 new entries in that blog. One is entitled 54321, a grounding practice with the soil, and another blog entry is called Good Soil Makes a Good Sandwich. Yeah, that got your curiosity going. So just go to forthesoil.org and click on blog. Mary, would you introduce our special guest today?
Thanks, Jeff. We're excited to have Bob Warian with us. Bob wears multiple hats, is a farmer in Essex, Virginia, runs Brandon Farms with his family, and is also a senior conservation specialist with the Colonial Soil and Water Conservation District, specifically working on climate smart agriculture there and some new projects they have going. Also a cover crop expert, very engaged in innovative farmer circles around the state and country. So Bob, excited to reap some of your knowledge today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Tell us about your farm.
We're in Dunnsville, Virginia, just outside of Tappahannock. So we're on the eastern half of the state. We're a corn and soybean, and I'll say cover crop farm. We put as much emphasis as we can on cover crops, but we grew wheat probably 10 years ago, and we've gotten out of the wheat market. But we do a lot of experimentation with Virginia Tech, but also on our own. And we actually have put in 2 small fields this year back into wheat because I'm looking at some summer cover crop mixes this year, and I'm trying to see if I can. I know it's not possible, grow my fertilizer. That's kind of what I'm trying to do ahead of next year's corn crop. And so we're looking at vetch. We put vetch in front of corn. We run specifically black oats in front of soybeans, but we're putting in 3 and 4 way mixes in prior to those black oats. That's gonna be something new we're doing this year. We mixed them all in this year with the black oats, but I'm gonna actually be putting in crazy, but it's gonna be 2 sets of cover crops in the fall. So behind corn. I'm the type of person that just has to take something that I learned this year and try to figure out things for next year. That is soil health, based on soil health parameters. So,
and Bob, when you think about cover crops, they can perform different functions. How did you get started with cover crops?
Well, I've been in the industry. I was with the state of Virginia for 19 years. Prior to that, I was in the industry selling fertilizer, and so I've dealt with cover crops for many, many years. But through my nutrient management position at the state of Virginia, I dealt with farmers with cover crops and began to understand the value of it. Through, as Mary said, I'm in a bunch of different organizations. The Southern Cover Crops Council, I was on the executive board there. I'm on the Innovative Roundtable with it's a group of farmers across the state of Virginia that are very innovative in cover crops. And so you bounce ideas off of each other, and you learn, and you move forward, and you figure out how to put those systems on your farm, and you learn on your farm. That's how I think I've come to the point that we are on ours.
And Bob, I believe recently your farm was the first in Virginia of American Farmland Trust and soil health economic case studies, and found the economic benefit, I believe it was $55 per acre net benefit of soil health practices, specifically cover crops and nutrient management. Would love to hear a little bit though about that benefit what you're seeing, but also was there a time lag for you?
That was a great experience. So yeah, I started talking to American Farmland Trust probably a year and a half ago, and we had multiple interviews, and they looked at all different facets of the farm, cover crops, our inputs, what the yields were. We were using yield maps, and we had the capability back 6 years to look at yield maps. And so we were taking that data, looking at our cover crop, the nitrogen coming out of vetch, the phosphorus and potassium being cycled through black oats and vetch as well. And they came up with what I think was a good representation of what we're seeing as far as economics on the farm. And I think that's one thing that we don't pay a lot of attention to, but it's the economics of these cover crops that are helping us with the times that we're getting ready to face. And again, we're looking at very low margins on the farm, I think, coming up in the next couple of years because of fertilizer prices are remaining high, but our commodity prices are going to be lower, I think, than we've seen in the past couple of years. So they pulled all of that together, and it was an honor to be part of that. And they're all across the United States, American Farmland Trust, and it's a great organization to showcase what soil health and cover crops can do for us on the farm, the economics of it. So
we're talking today with Bob Waring. He is with Brandon Farms in Essex County, Virginia. And Bob, I'm looking at the 2-page economic study as we speak. And there's a story there on that website about this American Farmland Trust economic study concerning soil health. And it concerns New York farmers and also Virginia farmers and Pennsylvania farmers. But the one in Virginia is your farm. And I'm looking specifically at the economic study. It says that your income increased by $21,000 and your cost of production went down by $18,000.
Yeah,
that's significant.
It is, and it's a system that we've gotten into, and we put in vetch in front of corn, and vetch is the legume, and I'm using that nitrogen source for my corn, and I have cut our nitrogen inputs, our synthetic nitrogen inputs, by over half. So where we were putting on 180 pounds of nitrogen, we're back down to 90 now, and I think I can cut it even more. And so that's some of those reduction in inputs that we're looking at. But it's not only the nitrogen side of things. I think a lot of people don't understand that phosphorus and potassium, and I think Virginia Tech is beginning to do experimentation on potassium coming out of these cover crops, especially vetch. Potassium comes out really fast, and when that vetch is terminated and it gets into that corn plant, it's available for that corn plant. So I'm reducing nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And this coming year, with the levels we have on the fields, we probably won't be putting out fertilizer on our corn crop this year. And I'm also looking at no fertilizer on soybeans this year. I do all the testing and so forth. I look at my values. I look at how my levels are trending. So how's my phosphorus and potassium trending from year to year? I use Virginia Tech as my source. The other input reduction, I guess, if you will, are my chemicals. And we roll down our vetch. We don't roll it to terminate it, but we roll it to manage it. And that's because of I am a firm believer in road cleaners, and that's a whole nother conversation. But we roll it down and plant into that green rolled down mat, and there is very little weeds that can grow through that mat. And so where in the past I was putting on a whole host of pre-emergence chemicals that burn down, and then we were coming over the top with another whole host of chemicals. This past year, our burn down program on corn and soybeans was less than $15 for everything. And then we came over the top with simply Roundup and on some strips, and then Roundup, atrazine, and some villain. But I think I can cut all that out. So I do believe that our inputs is where we're going to be saving in the future. And to say this, I'm not a yield driven person. I am a return on investment person, and I do shoot for average yields every year. I expect average yields, but in fact, we're actually seeing a little bit higher than average yields through these systems. But I'm more driven on input reductions. That's how I'm driven, and that's what I look at. And a lot of it's coming from cycling of these nutrients, and reduction in the inputs.
Bob, I know here in the valley there's more cover crops seed dealers that are carrying vetch, and I know some farmers see it as a weed, or maybe are accustomed to seeing their fields more clean. And you had talked about the mindset that you have. If you could speak a little bit more about that.
It is a system. It is a mindset that you have to get in. And I understand. I'm looking at things in a little bit different way because I'm using that vetch as my input reduction. There are hard seeds involved with vetch, but there are other legumes that you could use. There's clovers, there's cowpeas, there's Austrian peas. So there are other legumes. If somebody is hesitant about vetch, vetch produces a lot of nitrogen up front. But clover will produce a good bit of a balance of clover will produce a good bit of nitrogen. Austrian winter peas will also produce a good bit of nitrogen. So finding a legume that fits in your system, I think, is more important than focusing strictly on vetch. It's just that vetch for us it has turned out and worked well, and so that's why we're using that system that we are. But certainly there are other legumes that can be used.
And Bob, I know we're coming towards the end of this episode, but would just love to hear a little bit about, I know you spoke some to how involved you are in other farmer circles, peer-to-peer learning, and what role that has played in helping you reach these levels of innovation, and where you're seeing the opportunity for other farmers.
I think that I'm part of this innovative, the Climate Smart grant through Colonial, and we're working through Virginia Tech on that. And I've spoken to a lot of farmers about the issues that we face with climate. And I think that embracing some of these practices, whether it's cover crop, whether it's precision agriculture, what have you, I think it's going to be important for the future, because we have to try to mitigate. We have to try to become climate tolerant and economic tolerant. I think it's important that we utilize cover crops in the future for our sustainability, I guess I will say. And I think that being part of the grant has really, I've been able to talk to a lot of farmers and get their take on what's happening and how we need to move forward in the future. And a lot of them are on board, and they understand what we have to do in agriculture. I think it's important for what we do across the U.S. and certainly bringing soil health into the conversation is very important. And most farmers are open to that direction. I think it's important for what we do in agriculture.
We're talking today with Bob Waring of Brandon Farms in Essex County, Virginia. And Bob, I wanted to talk just for a moment about, your proximity to the Chesapeake Bay, and a lot of Virginia is in relative proximity to the Chesapeake Bay with runoff. And farmers, of course, there's been a lot of focus on nutrients running into the bay, and the agricultural community being called upon to help clean up the Chesapeake Bay. In your opinion, have we made any progress in the last few years?
I think, yes. Farmers in this area, I believe that we are way more advanced when it comes to what we're doing. We are, whether it be cover crops, or whether it be precision agriculture or what have you, varying the rate of fertilizers. With the margins that we have nowadays, the slight margins, farmers, a lot of them cannot afford to over-apply fertilizers. Where I think we need to focus efforts in the future with that is focusing on biomass, focusing on with biomass in cover crops comes more nutrient cycling, and so it's a snowball effect, and that's where we are on our farm, and getting farmers to understand, helping farmers understand that the more biomass that you can grow in front of that crop, the more nutrients that are going to be cycled, and the more carbon that is sequestered, more nitrogen that is more nitrogen that reduction in leaching and so forth. So it's a win-win for everybody. And I think we have made great strides as far as water quality, reducing runoff, et cetera. I absolutely do. I just think we need to focus our efforts in the future. And there's talk about pay for performance. And I think that's where we need to begin to head in the future, is looking at growing our cover crops in the way that we would grow our cash crops. So focusing the efforts as much as we could on cover crops as well.
Well said. Bob Waring with Brandon Farms in Essex County, Virginia. Bob, I want to thank you for everything you do, and I agree with you. We are making progress, and as long as we're making progress, I think everybody's pretty much a happy camper. But thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I know this is a very busy time of the year for you, and thank you for taking the time to join us. Thank you, Bob.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
For the Soil, a conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. If you should have a specific question about soil health, call your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or contact a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of the Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.